Welcome to The Explainer. What if one of the technologies most criticized for its energy use was actually a key to unlocking our green energy future? Today, we're going to dig into the surprising story of how Bitcoin mining is becoming this incredibly powerful tool for stabilizing our power grids.
So let's jump right in. The world is in this massive race to switch to renewable energy. And we're building these amazing wind and solar farms, often in the most remote places you can imagine. Deserts, mountaintops, basically wherever the sun shines brightest and the wind blows hardest.
But here's the catch. These sources are, well, they're inconsistent. The sun goes down, the wind stops blowing. And because these farms are so often far away from our cities, a huge chunk of the clean power they generate, it just can't be used. It has to be curtailed, which is a fancy word for literally thrown away.
And that's a massive roadblock for the whole green energy transition. But what if a really important part of the solution comes from a place you would never, ever expect? Today, we're going to explore how one of the most criticized technologies out there might just be a missing piece of the puzzle. Okay, so to really get this, we first have to talk about the controversy. Let's look at exactly why Bitcoin mining has this, let's say, less than stellar reputation when it comes to energy.
I mean, we've all seen the headlines, right? Bitcoin's energy use is constantly being compared to that of entire countries. And we're not talking about small countries either. This has basically made it public enemy number one for a lot of environmental critics.
All that energy demand comes from its security model, which is called proof of work. To put it simply, it's this giant global competition where super powerful computers are all racing to solve these complex cryptographic puzzles. It's what keeps the network secure, but it also creates this constant, massive, and, non-negotiable thirst for electricity.
But here's the crazy paradox. The very things that make mining so hungry for power also make it a uniquely flexible power consumer. Think about it. A steel plant or an aluminum smelter, they can't just shut down at a moment's notice. A Bitcoin mining operation, it can be turned off in seconds and can be built literally anywhere. That flexibility, that's the key to this whole thing. So how does this actually play out in the real world? Let's break down how this incredible flexibility allows Bitcoin mining to basically act like a virtual battery for the entire power grid.
It really comes down to two critical functions. First, it can act as a buyer of last resort, soaking up huge amounts of power that would otherwise just go to waste. And second, through something called demand response, it can instantly stop using power, effectively giving it back to the grid right when it's needed the most.
A perfect example of this happened out in the Texas Panhandle. There was this massive wind farm built way out in the middle of nowhere. It produced tons of clean energy, but because there weren't enough power lines to get it to a city, up to 40% of its output was just being wasted. Gone.
And this is where the genius solution comes in. A Bitcoin mining facility was built right next door to the wind farm. As you can see here, the miners become that buyer of last resort. They just buy up all that cheap, excess power that the grid can't handle. And just like that, wasted energy gets turned into revenue, making the entire renewable project profitable all on its own.
But that second function, stabilizing the grid, is maybe even more critical. Because mining is just running a calculation, the whole operation can be shut down in seconds without damaging anything. This amazing ability is called demand response, and it was about to be put to the ultimate test.
Okay, February 2021. The historic winter storm Uri slams into Texas. This was a catastrophic, once-in-a-century event. Power plants, natural gas lines, they all froze over, leading to these massive failures all across the state's energy grid.
Temperatures just plummeted, down to negative 14 degrees Fahrenheit in some places. And of course, demand for electricity for heating went through the roof. At the exact moment, the power supply was completely collapsing.
The impact on the energy market was insane. The wholesale price of electricity, which is normally around, say, $30 per megawatt hour, it hit the absolute maximum price cap of $9,000, and the entire grid was teetering on the edge of a total statewide blackout.
And then this happened. In response to the crisis, virtually all of Texas's Bitcoin miners voluntarily shut everything down. In an instant, they gave back 1,500 megawatts of power to the grid. That's enough to keep the lights on and the heat running for hundreds of thousands of homes.
And this wasn't just a one-time thing. The Texas grid operator, ERCOT, now sees miners as one of its most reliable partners for preventing blackouts. As its former CEO said, mining actually helps make renewables more profitable, which in turn drives the development of more clean energy projects. It's a virtuous cycle.
But the environmental upside doesn't even stop at stabilizing the grid. This exact same model can be used to tackle another huge source of emissions. Let's talk about methane. Methane is a greenhouse gas that is over 80 times more potent than CO2 when it comes to trapping heat, and massive amounts of it are just vented into the atmosphere from oil wells and landfills every single day.
And this is where things get really innovative. Companies are now putting mobile Bitcoin mining centers right on site at oil wells to capture the natural gas that would otherwise just be flared, wastefully burned off. They're also doing it at landfills, capturing harmful leaking methane and converting it into useful electricity right there on the spot.
And this really shows you the whole picture. You're taking a polluting waste product from our old school energy system and using it to power a high-tech asset that helps us build a cleaner, more stable, and more modern grid. It's pretty incredible. So, what all this means is that we have to look beyond the simple and frankly often misleading debate about pure energy consumption. We need to see the bigger picture of energy production and grid stabilization.
So let's just recap these unique superpowers. Bitcoin mining is location independent, so it can go right where stranded energy is. It's perfectly interruptible, so it acts like a giant shock absorber for the grid. It's incredibly price sensitive, which means it's naturally drawn to the cheapest power available. And it serves as that crucial buyer of last resort, turning what would be waste into value and making new green energy projects possible in the first place.
Now look, this is not some silver bullet that's going to solve all of our climate challenges overnight, but it's a really powerful example of how solutions can pop up from the most unexpected places. And it forces us to ask a really important question. As we're designing the energy grid of the future, what other unconventional, game-changing solutions are we overlooking right now?